Good evening, guys. So, today we'll be learning about the ethical hacking methodology, which is basically the approach an ethical hacker should follow when performing a penetration test on a target or an organization. Now, there are several different frameworks developed for this, such as the NIST Penetration Testing Guide, the Cyberkill Chain, the OWASP Testing Guide, and so on. Now, these frameworks, most of them follow five phases which are common to all, that is, reconnaissance or information gathering, scanning and enumeration, exploitation, persistence or maintaining access, and the last one being clearing our tracks. Now, coming to the first phase of ethical hacking, that is reconnaissance or information gathering. Now, this phase, what happens is we covertly discover and collect information about a system, person, or an organization. Now, this can be a simple email address of an employee, the subdomains of a website, or even the physical location of an organization. Now, there are two main types of reconnaissance or two ways in which we can gather information. The first one being passive reconnaissance. Now, in passive reconnaissance, we don't actively interact with the target, but what we do here is basically gather information that is available on the internet and which is free to all. This is also called as OSINT or open source intelligence, since this information is available through open sources and it is completely legal to access this information. It could be the email addresses of employees, it could be the employee social media profile, it could be the location of an organization, okay, and it can also be credentials which are leaked on the internet. Now we come to active reconnaissance. Active reconnaissance, basically what happens here is we interact with the system, and this can be such as performing network scans on an organization. Now what happens here is that how do we actively interact is that by performing scans, it can generate logs on a system. It can be easily detected that someone is trying to scan the network. Okay, we basically scan for services which are running on the system, the ports which are open, and this is very easily detectable. That's the main difference between passive reconnaissance and active reconnaissance. But the main aim is in both these techniques is to gain information about a network or an organization. There are different tools used for this, and the most widely used tool for gathering open source information is the internet. We can do this using different browsers such as Google, Firefox, and many different types of browsers. Then we can gather email addresses through a tool called Harvester. We have the Shodan, which is an IoT search engine. Then we have Sublister, which basically helps in gathering subdomains of a website. And there are many different other different tools such as Maltego and Wireshark, which we'll see later. Now, coming to the second phase, which is scanning and enumeration, like I said, this is considered as active reconnaissance. It is basically an extension of active reconnaissance that helps us identify what services and ports are open on a system. And we can also identify what kind of vulnerabilities are present on the system by seeing what particular version or service is running. Enumeration is basically when we, after finding information on what services are running on a system, we can further enumerate them to gather information such as usernames, machine names using NetBIOS, and whatever protocols are there running on the system, network resources, shared drives, and many other things which are running. Now, there are many different tools for this, but the most widely used tool for scanning and enumeration is Nmap. And similarly, there are other tools such as Masscan, Hydra for brute forcing. We can use GoBuster for directory enumeration, and so on. Our main focus will be on learning Nmap in this phase, which is a tool which is widely used in the industry. Coming to the next phase, which is exploitation or gaining access to a system. Now, once we scan a system and identify the vulnerabilities present on it, the next step is to exploit these vulnerabilities and gain access to a system. We can do this by using some form of malicious code called as a payload and gaining access on a server called as a command and control server. And the most basic and widely used C2 server is Metasploit, Cobalt Strike, and so on. And we can either generate our own payloads or through a tool called MSF Venom. There are a lot of tools for this which we'll be seeing later. And in this phase, we basically deal with payloads and exploits. Okay. After once we gain access to the system, there are two other phases which I haven't spoken about. The first one being privilege escalation. In privilege escalation, what do we do is whenever we gain access to a system, it's not necessary that we always gain access or the complete access to the system. That is the administrator level access or the root access. When we gain access, mostly we will gain access to some user's account, and the next thing we need to do is we have to elevate a privilege to a higher privileged user. That can be an administrator account. We will see how to do this. There are different techniques and tools used for this, and also another phase called as a lateral movement, where after gaining access to one system, we can gain access to other systems in the network. Okay, we will see how to do that in this phase. Coming to the next phase, once we gain access to any system, we need to make sure we maintain that access. And we can do this by installing backdoors, using Trojans, rootkits, or some malicious putting some malicious file on that system. Okay, which executes when some specific condition is met. For example, let's say if the user restarts the system, a malware runs automatically, and we again gain access to the system. Thus, we do not lose access to the system at all. Okay, now the main aim here is to maintain this access until we finish with all our tasks or objectives which we plan to accomplish on the target. And once we have accomplished our objectives and whatever task we had set, the last phase is basically clearing our tracks. Okay, so once we have accomplished different tasks such as extracting data or deleting some files or whatever we were tasked to do, we should make sure that there are no traces left that we were on the system, so that the investigators cannot track us. Okay, an intelligent hacker should always clear any evidence which is left on the system. This can be log files. We can clear the log files. We should delete the files and folders which we created, even remove the malware once we are done with our work, so that we remain undetectable and no one can trace us. Okay, so these are the 5 phases or 5 steps used in ethical hacking. And obviously the last thing you need to do as a penetration tester is make a report of all the findings and whatever you have found, and give it back to the person in charge or who has assigned you to do the task. With this, we have finished the basics of ethical hacking, and in the next videos, we will dive into different tools and techniques using which we can perform a penetration test. We will start with the phase one, that is information gathering. I will teach you how to use different tools on how to gather information through social media using different tools such as Nmap, Google Docs, and so on. So, see you in the next lecture. Till then, take care and goodbye.